we'll just start off with the normal and go from there. Alright, hello everybody, and welcome to another one of our conversations here with Dan. Now, we're obviously not in our normal locations here. For those of you who are truly living under a rock, we're under the whole self-quarantine type stuff because of the COVID-19. And Dan, you actually just returned from overseas, didn't you?
Yeah, we left Jerusalem Friday, and as Jed was talking about one of his friends, it was virtually a ghost town. The airport at Tel Aviv was almost empty.
Man.
And it's really weird. But yes, we just got back to our house on Sunday.
Yeah. Well, glad you made it back. And so we're going to try to put together a little video of something related to your trip. We always get a lot of questions in about this subject, and it just seemed to be an appropriate time. So because of distance and everything, it may look different, but we're going to still try to cover a question here today. So the question we want to cover today, Dan, is there benefit to a Christian traveling to and exploring the modern nation of Israel and the kind of places around it?
Absolutely. When you go there, and especially if you travel around the country, you get a sense of the geography of the place. You get a sense of where everything is located. You have the real pictures of the real places in your mind. You can get the biblical stories to every place you go. And of course, well, it's just ending. Well, you can only see a fraction of what's there each time you go.
I was going to say, this is
2 weeks this time.
This is your second time to go, right?
Yes. And the second time I went, a lot of things that I saw the first time I went were made a lot clearer and reinforced, and also saw a lot of new things. So it's extremely valuable to anyone that wants to go. But of course, you can't go now because Israel has closed its borders to all foreigners.
Yeah, we actually had another group come to our building. They knew we had some members traveling to Israel, and they were asking us questions about whether they should go and how to go. And we were like, well, you may not have any choice here in a day or two. And turns out, yeah. So it's been a wild ride with all of that. Now, you talked about on a personal level, there's some great benefit to it, kind of related to that. You know, people are associating a trip to Europe with, a lot of people talk about having to take pilgrimages, different places. Is there ever anything in the Bible that really says that a Christian can connect more deeply and they need to visit these places? I mean, as like a biblical need, sort of.
No, there's nothing said about that for Christians. However, there's extensive things said about that for people under the Mosaic covenant in Judaism. Because they had to go 3 times a year, and of course, that was part of the Mosaic law. And Jerusalem itself was the place of their pilgrimage because it was designated by God as a holy city.
Okay. So if it was the holy city, and nowadays it's very common, you know, and we heard it from different people around here when they were talking about y'all being gone, they would say, oh, people are going to visit the Holy Lands. And then there were some people that would really bristle at that term. You know, so in a sense, were you going to visit the Holy Lands, or were you just going to visit Israel and historical sites around the area?
The word holy, when it's all taken theologically, boils down to this. It means something that has been designated by God. And in the time of Abraham, God promised that land to Abraham. And he said in Genesis chapter 12, blessing, in Genesis 12, verse 7, to your offspring I will give this land. So God designated that land as a heritage for Abraham.
Okay.
Then in Genesis 15, when God gave it promise and blessing to Abraham, made a covenant with Abraham. He told Abraham that they would leave the land and be enslaved for 400 years. And in verse 16, it said, in the fourth generation, your descendants will come back here to the land of Canaan. So,
right.
Of course, that was after the Israelites were delivered from bondage. So it was designated by God as a holy land for the descendants of Abraham. Testament.
Okay.
Now, about Jerusalem itself, as time went by and after the conquest of Jerusalem, Deuteronomy, right before Joshua went over into the land, in Deuteronomy chapter 12,
okay,
verse 5, designated a special place in the Holy Land, and that place was Jerusalem. And he said, to the place which I shall choose, which the Lord your God shall choose among all your tribes to put his name there.
Yeah.
Even to that place you're going to bring your and peace offerings.
Yeah.
So even in the law of Moses, God chose that place, even though he hadn't specified what place. He said there would be a place chosen. And of course, Jerusalem was there before God chose it as a holy place. It was actually an ancient Canaanite city called Ir Shalom. Ir means city, Shalom means peace. So if you say that together, Ir Shalom, that's Jerusalem.
Yeah, the city of peace.
The meaning of the word, but in Genesis, city of peace. In Genesis 14, when Abraham had rescued Lot, and he came back from slaughter of kings, he met a priest named Melchizedek.
Yes.
And Melchizedek was king of Salem, which is the city of Salem, the city of peace. He was actually the king of ancient Canaanite Jerusalem.
Oh.
And he was also a priest of Most High. Furthermore, Brother Jed, in Genesis 22, everybody knows the story of when God told Abraham to go to the mountain of Moriah and offer his son Isaac on that mountain.
Right.
But Mount Moriah, where Abraham almost offered Isaac, God prepared a ram as a substitute. That mountain is the very place which was chosen by God of the temple. In 1 Chronicles chapter 21,
First Chronicles.
after David's army defeated Absalom and his rebellion, there was a great plague sent upon Israel.
Yep.
And David found himself on Mount Moriah at the threshing floor of Araunah. And God told him at that site to build an altar. And so he bought that site from Araunah the Jebusite. And at the end of chapter 21 and the beginning of 1 Chronicles 22, he said the altar of the Lord is going to be right there. At that spot.
Yeah.
That's when God chose the site for all the burnt offerings and peace offerings, etc., on Mount Moriah, which is Temple Mount Jerusalem.
Okay.
And it is after that that God gave David the plans for his son Solomon built the temple on that site. And it was definitely the place God chose. It was a holy place at that time.
So I mean, it's pretty clear that that was the holy site and the holy lands, the holy city, all these different things in the Old Testament for those living under the law. So I guess the question is, in today's day and age, for a Christian, under the new covenant, post-Jesus resurrection sort of life, is it still a holy site, or is it simply a place of, historical interest?
Well, Jesus himself answered that question in John chapter 4 And he was talking with the woman at the well about the place where people should worship.
Mm-hmm.
And he said that the time was coming that neither in Mount Gerizim, where the Samaritans were worshiping, or in Jerusalem would people worship the Father, but people could worship anywhere as long as they worshiped in spirit and in truth.
Yeah.
So Jesus said God would no longer consider that to be the holy place where people would worship. He also promised to build a new temple in John chapter 2, about verse 18. He said, destroy this temple, and in 3 days I will build it. John 2, verse 22 or so, he said this, or maybe verse 20, he said concerning the temple of his body.
Yeah.
About the church.
Yeah, 18 to 22
so
is that section.
Built out of living stones is the holy temple of God, and it's not attached to a place today. So the land and the place is no longer designated as holy, because God's word and his covenant, his new covenant, is not tied to a place.
Yeah. So it's like you personally can go and gain a lot of insight and appreciation, and you can connect kind of with the history of all the great people that have been there, but it's not necessarily like going to give you some extra spiritual, I don't know, some extra credits in heaven sort of thing for getting there and being in a special place any longer.
Right. We found a lot of people there that were making pilgrimages, and they would go to this side of the crucifixion or resurrection, and they would bend down and kiss particular stones, and they would feel like there was great blessing from being in that place. It certainly gives you a strange and wonderful feeling to be in those places. There's no question about that. But modern Jerusalem is coveted by all kinds of people. In the old city of Jerusalem, you'll find Muslims from all kinds of countries.
Yeah.
Because their Blue Mosque, the Dome of the Rock, is built right on top of the site of the temple when Jesus was there.
Right.
And to them, to the Palestinians and the Arabs of all nations, it is their third most holy place in the whole world. Also, there are Christians, the generic kind of Christians from all over the world who go there. And, of course, we ran into Chinese Christians and Colombian Christians, Mexican Christians and Russians and every other type of person.
Yeah.
The Jews, of course, have a heavy population in that land.
Yeah.
And since 1947 have fought for that land as their land.
Yeah.
At the West Wall, where they all go to pray, it's a hodgepodge of people, and many Jews are there. We actually went under the city to the western wall of the temple and one of the ancient gates, and there were Jewish women that were up against the wall, and they were just praying as a holy spot to them.
Hey,
but city.
I'm going to pause real quick just because of technical stuff. I need to make sure, because we're not recording the same way. So I'm going to pause real quick, and then you sent me a couple of pictures, and one of them being there of the wall, and I want to jump back in with that discussion. So just 1 second.
Okay.
So we're back up and running, and we were talking about the Western Wall. You were talking about that experience of going towards that section of the temple, okay? And you sent me a picture, and I'll drop that into the video so everyone can kind of see the perspective that you were sending. There's all these people going up to it, and maybe people have seen videos of it before, but what was that experience like, seeing the crowds of people all spending time at this one section of wall?
Well, it's part of the wall of the Temple Mount, and 1 Kings chapter 6, 7, Solomon prayed, and in Solomon's great prayer, he talked about God's people praying toward his temple, praying toward that place.
Mm-hmm.
That's likely the reason why these people feel so compelled to pray toward where the ancient temple was standing on that western wall. And, of course, God said in Isaiah 66 that no house could contain him. And that he also said in the first chapter of Isaiah and the seventh chapter of Jeremiah that prayers are useless unless it comes from the right kind of heart, but people are intent. That plaza there is massive. I don't know how many is in that plaza, but it's filled with Jews, particularly, and Christians, but a lot of different kinds of Jews from all over the world. The very Orthodox Jews are often in that place in great numbers, and there's Russian Jews, there's Eastern Jews, there's Israeli Jews, there's Jews from all parts of the world that go there and they pray toward that place, probably because of what it says in Solomon's prayer in the book of Kings. But many Christians have been caught up into that idea that it's some kind of a holy hotline prayer place, but as we've talked before, it's not. And it's not any better to put a note in that wall than it is to just cry out to God in your own room, because it's true worshipers in any place that can pray today.
Yeah, and there's a lot of people that were considering whether to go to the wall to pray or to put the pieces of paper in and different things. And it's that sort of is, I guess if it's you just want to feel connected to something, but is there anything that, I guess if you start to put more trust in that connection than the connection you have every day, is that maybe the point when most people would start to flinch a bit?
It's a form of idolatry. Yeah, it's a form of idolatry, which we really need to shy away from. And Jesus said, go in your closet and pray to your Father in secret, and he hears you. So you need to realize that God is not in any particular place.
Yeah.
And he's certainly not. And one of the things that is really weird about that is you're walking around that place, and right above that place is one of the holiest Muslim sites, the Dome.
Yeah.
Which is on the ancient temple.
You
have to go through separate security to get into that Palestinian-controlled place.
And I would imagine that while you're there... Oh, sorry. Connection issues. I would assume while you're there at the wall seeing all the people praying, you can probably hear like the calls to prayer that are happening throughout the day at the same time?
Yes, that's what I was going to say,
Yeah.
Is that the minarets are everywhere, and you're walking below the temple and they're calling out in very loud voices, the Muslim prayers, and there are Muslim villages built up the sides of the hill right out, and every several hundred yards there's another minaret and they're calling out the prayers. So it's very ironic that there's only one church of New Testament Christians in all of Palestine, and it is at Nazareth.
Okay.
And every one of them is an Arabic speaker. There's not a single Jewish convert. All the Bibles there are in Arabic, the sermon Arabic, and so it's very weird. And there's only like 30 or 40 people in the one church in the whole country. But Islam and Judaism are very prominent.
Yeah.
Not Christianity.
Man, it's a strange thing to see all of it just mixed and commingled, and I mean, obviously not necessarily all getting along all the time, but in that same space. There was one other picture you sent me that that I'll toss up and everything, but is it part of the temple or nearby the temple? The one of the road that you sent me.
It is actually a first century street from the time of the Great that built the temple in Jesus' day, and it is right under one of the entry gates to the ancient temple in the time of Jesus.
Okay.
And it's extremely likely that Jesus himself was walking down that street, and the apostles, and you can look up from that street and you see high up the wall to where the gates of the temple were, and it gives you a perspective. There's no way without being there that you can get a perspective of how truly massive the ancient temple and its mount were.
Yeah.
Herod the Great used humongous stones, and what you see there looks like 3 little windows, I think, in that is part of an ancient arch.
Okay.
That had a staircase that went over the top of it and went way high above your head.
Man.
And entered into one of the gates of the temple. And this street was under that arch that entered into the temple. And we're talking way up into the sky. And there, I forget how many acres are in the plaza of the temple up there, but it's huge.
Yeah.
People understand that you could get for miles, and it was massive, and it was like commanding everything. It was really grand beyond what we can even communicate on this.
Well, I think that's when we read the stories in the Bible, when we read those passages about everyone being gathered together in the temple courts, you know, and even when Jesus went in and he's flipping tables and stuff, even when you look at a picture or a video description, I mean, it's like a little small, not even as big as like a church auditorium sort of space a lot of times. And we think, well, how could everyone have fit in there? And how could all of that stuff have been? But yeah, when you really look at it, and for those who have been fortunate enough to go, it is huge.
Yeah, and another thing we maybe talk about in a different video are mikvahs, or immersion pools, just all over the place, bottom of the steps of the temple and all around. And they're big, and when you see all of those back Jesus and before, it's like, whoa, I never realized how they could baptize so many people. But I mean, there's after pool, and they're just easy peasy for people to baptize jillions of people down.
Now, it might have cut out a little bit. What were those pools called again?
They're each individual pool, mikvah, an immersion pool. And
okay.
There's a whole section in the mikvah, that's the plural, means immersion pools. But all around the Temple Mount, you've got jillions of those.
Very interesting. Yeah, we may have to talk about that another time. But I think this is probably a good point to wrap it up for this video. Maybe by the time we're needing to do another one, we can actually be in the same room and everything. Hopefully people will find this interesting. I know that there's always a lot of questions about these spaces back in Israel and in Palestine and various things that are connected to the history of the Bible, of God's Word. So thanks for exploring this.
We can say a whole lot more about it.
Oh, I have no doubt. I think it would be cool to actually get some of the other people that went on the trip with you and get some of their responses and thoughts too. So maybe we'll do some of that along the way. I'm talking to the other camera too, by the way. But anyway, thanks for sitting down with me, Dan, and we'll see everybody again soon. Bye.
Okay, God bless.